The next type of heading that we're going to talk about is personal name headings. And personal name headings are headings for the proper name of a person or persons. So you would use these when you have a book that is about a particular person or maybe a family of people. You'll most often see personal name headings that are for individual people. And these are a few examples of these types of personal name headings. You'll see that they appear in inverted form, which means that the last name comes first, followed by a comma, and then the first name. You can also see personal name headings for families or royal houses, things like that. So the Rockefeller family or the House of Habsburg, those are also personal name headings, even though they are for more than one person. Now the other thing that can get kind of complicated with personal name headings compared to the other types that we've talked about is the fact that they often include qualifiers so that you can distinguish one person from a different person. And so one way of doing this is by including birth and or death dates, whatever is known. So you'll see that both of these examples have birth and death dates after them, and these are separated from the name by a comma. Now in the example for Richard Nixon's name, it includes another type of qualifier, which is the fuller form of the name. Even though most of the items with his name on it will appear as Richard M. Nixon, we also wanted to provide the fuller form of the name, Richard Milhouse. And so that's included in parentheses after the original form of the name. Another type of qualifier that you'll see is a title of rank. So for example, this heading for Sir Francis Drake includes his title, and the title comes after the name, but before the birth and death dates. And the last type of qualifier you'll sometimes see is a phrase that clarifies what type of person this is. So we have the example of Elijah, a biblical prophet. Without that qualifying phrase, it might be kind of hard to tell who Elijah was with just the first name. So you'll see phrases like this, like fictional character or Egyptian deity or biblical figure. So they just describe a little bit more what this person is. Personal names are in the MARC field 600 in bibliographic records. So you can see down there at the bottom we have a 600 field for John D. Rockefeller IV, and he is qualified by a fuller form of his name. John Davison is the fuller form of John D., but then it also includes his birth date, so we can be sure that we're talking about John D. Rockefeller IV and not any of the other John D. Rockefellers. In an authority record, the MARC field used for personal name headings is a 100. So again, the last two digits correlate to that 600 in the bibliographic record, but in the authority record it's a 100. And you can see that this is an authority record for John D. Rockefeller, but it's not the same John D. Rockefeller we had in the bibliographic record. He has his birth and death dates of 1906 to 1978, and so this one is actually John D. Rockefeller III, the father of the other one we were looking at in the bib record. So this is just a reason why it's important to look up your personal name headings in the authority records to make sure you've got the right qualifiers and make sure you're using the heading for the correct person that you're looking for. When we're talking about MARC format, the indicators get a little bit more complicated with personal name headings than with our other types of headings. We do, for once, use a first indicator other than just a blank, and there are a few different options. If the first indicator is 0, it means that the name is just a forename, a person's first name. So Cher, for example, who just goes by her first name, she would have a first indicator of 0. More often you'll see a first indicator of 1, which stands for surname, and means that the name appears with the last name first, followed by a comma, and then the first name. So this is probably the most common indicator you will use. But you can also have a first indicator of 3 for family name. And so if you had something like the Rockefeller family, you would use a first indicator of 3. Now the subfields, when we're talking about MARC formatting, also get a little bit more complicated with the personal name headings. This is the first time that we're going to see subfields other than just A for a subject heading. So for personal name headings, subfield A is used for the main heading itself, and then the other subfields are used for the various types of qualifiers. If you have a heading with birth or death dates, or both, those go in subfield D. A fuller form of the name appears in subfield Q, And subfield C is used for titles or other words associated with a name. So here are some examples that we looked at earlier in the lesson. You can see the first example has a 600 tag. It has a first indicator of 1 because the last name comes first. And just like all the other subject headings, the second indicator is 0 because this is a Library of Congress heading. And Paul McCartney's heading is pretty simple. It just has the main personal name heading, so that goes into subfield A. Richard Nixon's heading, on the other hand, is a little bit more complicated. It too has a 600 tag because it's a personal name heading. The first indicator is 1 because it starts with a surname. And the second indicator is 0 because it's a Library of Congress heading. So Nixon, Richard M goes in subfield A. That's the main personal name heading. Subfield Q is used for the fuller form of his name. And subfield D is used for his birth and death dates. In this example, you'll see that, again, the 600 tag is used for a personal name. For the first time, we have a different indicator than 1. This first indicator is 3 because it's a family name. And the second indicator is still 0 because it's a Library of Congress heading. And Rockefeller family just goes in subfield A, and it doesn't have any qualifiers, so no other subfields are needed. And in the last example, the Sir Francis Drake example, again, we have a 600 tag for a personal name. The first indicator is 1 because the name starts with the last name, and the second indicator is 0 because it is a Library of Congress heading. Drake, Francis goes in subfield A. That's the main body of the personal name heading. Sir is a title. It goes in subfield C. And then, as we've seen earlier, subfield D is for the birth and death dates. As with the other types of headings we've discussed, you can look up personal name headings in the Library of Congress website at authorities.loc.gov. Get started by clicking on the Search Authorities tag. And again, just like with the geographic headings, you want to use Name Authority headings. So make sure to select the second option, Name Authority headings, from the Search Type menu. And then type your text into the search text box. And that's how you search for personal name headings.